advocacy session. This one really focuses on us as individuals and asks questions about how we, on an individual level, can be effective in advocacy. And it's going to be a session of two halves. The first half will very much reflect on what are health workers up against. We heard just a moment ago about the stigma associated with COVID, which is impacting on various individuals. So what are we up against in terms of as health workers within the context of this COVID response? And I'm very grateful to Howard from the International Council of Nurses and to Francis from ACHEST, who are going to both throw insights into this. I'm then going to invite people to participate, to share their experiences and insights before moving to the second half of the meeting, where we will focus on how can we become effective advocates. And I'll invite Howard to speak again, perhaps about the Nursing Now Toolkit, and Charlotte from THET to talk about some of the advocacy that THET is doing with health workers here in the UK. So thanks so much for joining us. And I'm going to pass over to Howard, if I may, for the introductory remarks.
Ben, thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues, wherever you happen to be joining us from. As Ben said, my name is Howard Katzen. I'm a nurse. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the International Council of Nurses. For those of you who don't know, ICN was established back in 1899 by a nurse from the UK called Ethel Bedford Fenwick, who was a keen advocate and campaigner in her own right. She was at the forefront of establishing professional regulation in the UK. She established ICN. She worked very closely with the women's movement and campaigned for suffrage back at that time as well. We are the international organisation recognised by the World Health Organization. We have a special relationship and status to speak on behalf of nurses. Our membership are national nursing associations. We have over 130 in our membership from right the way around the world. There are about 27 million nurses worldwide, and we have been very proud to have been partners and friends with the Nursing Now campaign over the last 3 years, and I'm sure that we'll say a little bit more about that. Our president is Annette Kennedy. I was speaking to her just earlier, and I bring her greetings to you as well. I think you'll probably be aware that, some of you may be aware, ICN has been running a commentary about the nursing response to coronavirus over the course of the last 12 months or so. Our website, you can find lots of details. Keep an eye on social media, because we've actually got a special report out this weekend on all the work we've done over the last 12 years. And I'll just give you, over the last 12 months or so, I'll just give you a few highlights. From the get-go, we were incredibly concerned about the level of infections amongst healthcare workers. Tragically, I have to say as well, deaths also. We collected data and information from right the way around the world. The level of infection varied hugely between countries. Some countries where the healthcare worker infection may have been as low as 1 or 2%, in other countries up to 30%. On average, it changed over time as well, of course. On average, we think that the infection rates probably run somewhere between 8 and 10%. If that's right, if it's close to the truth, that is, millions. We're into 4 or 5 million health workers who have become infected, and there was a key issue in relation to the lack of PPE, supply of PPE, faulty or inadequate PPE, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about public health and prevention measures as well. We highlighted and flagged that, and tragically, because so many people had become infected, nurses and other healthcare workers were dying. The figure has gone up over the last months. Most recently, we said that we were aware of at least 3,000 nurses in 60 countries who had passed away as a result of contracting coronavirus. The true figure will be will be higher. We've had 2.5 million plus deaths from coronavirus around the world. If just 1% of those are healthcare workers, that's a figure of 25,000. And again, I think that that's very likely is to be higher. But the reason I'm able to say with absolute certainty is because we have not been collecting data on infections and deaths in a standardized and systematic way. This has been a key part of ICN's advocacy and lobbying over the last 12 months or so. But it's not just an issue about infections. We have also seen very clearly the mental health and psychological burden and distress that have been placed on people. We did a report just at the beginning of this year, again, based on the best evidence that we can gather from our associations and other sources around the world. We were seeing people who were physically exhausted and issues around anxiety and burnout, but we were seeing much more complicated issues as well. Examples of discrimination, some nurses in Asia who were finding difficulty in renewing their tenancies because their landlord feared that they were going to spread the virus. Difficulty accessing childcare for the same reason. Some abhorrent examples of violence, chlorine being thrown at healthcare workers and nurses in South America. And this isn't just, places that are a long way away. I saw the reports of the nurses coming off shift in Wales, having just had an intense shift, coping with people severely ill passing away, and then coming off and somebody shouting, "It's a hoax, it's not real." There's a real spectrum of mental health burdens and pressures on people. As I say, some anxiety and burnout that with the right support, and people hopefully will recover from quite quickly. But others, I fear, are longer lasting. We're seeing some examples of post-traumatic stress disorder. There have just been a few, but there have been some suicides of nurses around the world as a result of the pressures they're under. We called this in January the mass traumatization of the global nursing workforce, based on the evidence that we saw at the time. Just very recently, I've seen Dr. Tedros from WHO was reported as using exactly the same phrase just a few weeks ago. The impact of all of that, there are consequences, and our most recent report just 10 days ago, again, best evidence that we can gather from around the world and our associations on what's happening to quit rates and leaver rates amongst nurses. We went into this pandemic 6 million nurses short. I think nursing in many ways is emblematic of the lack of preparedness of health systems. But as a result of, we've termed it the COVID effect on nursing. We were getting reports as early as the end of last year of associations worried that they were already seeing more numbers of nurses leaving than they would expect. And we've gathered that data together through with some surveys that have been done looking at people's intentions to stay or go over the coming months, and those numbers are up as well. I don't want to get into the details of the figures, but this is potentially huge as well, because we've got a 6 million shortage globally. In significant parts of the world, we have an aging population, which could add another 4 million nurses who are going to retire within the next few years. If there is a COVID effect as well, and you add another 1 or 2 million, these are huge numbers. It really reinforces for us the importance of it's not just the recruitment piece. It's not just, we can perhaps talk about, I think that clearly nursing profession, the image has changed around the world, and there may be some benefits there in terms of new nurses coming into the profession, but that's going to take at least 3-4 years to bring those nurses on stream, and then new nurses. The nurses we're looking that we could be losing are very experienced nurses as well. Ben, I'll draw to a close, because I've given a lot, but I'm conscious I've also given a bit of a doom gloom scenario. I don't apologize for sharing what we're seeing and what the reality is. I think that's part of our role and our job. But we are acutely aware, and we try and do this in a lot of work, I'm sure we'll talk about this more, about to analyze and understand then what's happening and what's going on, in order for us to think about what the solutions are and what some of the policy options might be as well. And I've got some examples that I can put into the pot, and I can share with you when we get to the advocacy part of the part of the conversation. But let me stop there for now, Ben. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Howard. And earlier, when I was making my opening remarks, I was reflecting on the 800 deaths in the UK amongst health workers within 9 months last year. So there are grounds, as you say, to be very cross with what's happening, angry about what's happening. I'm delighted Solaire's with us as well, who spoke very movingly earlier. Solaire, of course, you're based in Wales, so you might want to pick up on the comments Howard was making about Wales. But may I turn to Francis, to Professor Francis Amazwa, and invite him to, is this what Howard's outlining, is this very familiar to you? Is this the kind of territory that you're observing?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's not just nurses in like Europe or America, but it is also nurses and health workers generally around the world. We are challenged right now with handling information, misinformation, correct information. And when some of our leaders are not supporting health workers in getting the correct information out there so that the public is together with the health workers based on the actual situation, then the life of health workers becomes very complicated. We are challenged with issues of alternative facts versus real facts, issues of is it actual facts, and you find that in this type of scenario, health workers are in a dilemma. They themselves have to find out what actually the facts are. And then on top of that, they have to manage a community, a public, who is influenced by those issues of what is true and what is not true. I want to refer to the very sad example of a head of state here in Africa who really took a line that COVID doesn't exist in his country. How do we deal with situations like that? At national level, at global level, even down to community level. And here, I think let's take the opportunity of this discussion to throw some thoughts out there as to what could be done. I'm now starting to look at other heads of state, for example. What has been their role in this? I'm looking at health workers, health professionals, other professionals, lawyers, and so on in our countries. How do we learn to speak the truth to power so that it is possible for health workers to be able to do their job based on the real facts and not on alternative facts and innuendo and so on? So it reminds me of what I learned in my frequent visits to Thailand when I was working for the Global Workforce Alliance. They taught me about a triangle which moves mountains. And this triangle is about this topic. What are the needs of the people? That's one corner of the triangle. What are the solutions to those needs of the people? And those solutions are generated by experts, by knowledge generators, maybe academia, think tanks, research centers. Civil society also is part of this. And the third corner of the triangle is politics, the politicians. And the theory is that if the knowledge generators worked closely with communities to understand the needs of the people, and together the knowledge generators with the communities go to the politicians and say, look, friends, these are the solutions. The politicians will have no choice but to implement those solutions if they are backed and demanded by the population. So as we move forward with this issue of health workforce and advocacy for how to support them best, I would like us to be thinking through these partnerships on how we can encourage health professionals through their different associations, the ICN, and, whatever, World Medical Association, whatever, to learn to be able to speak truth to power in the spirit of inform and inspire as opposed to name and shame. And if we are able to get a critical mass who is taking that direction, including peers of anyone, head of state or head of department or head of an institution, then we have a chance that facts will be respected. First of all, will be known, will be respected, will be followed, and that will make the work of health workers so much more easy. So let me stop there for now. It is something which really is of major concern to me, because it's all over with WhatsApp and this and Twitter things. Everyone is saying something, and then other people are asking, but is this true? Should I take this vaccine? Someone said it's not working. So where is the truth? How can we get the truth to be the dominant driver of our behavior? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to open up to the floor, but I would say one thing, which is, just to add to the challenge, you mentioned Tanzania. I've struggled to find colleagues who will speak, even to me, about the situation in Tanzania. There is that level of fear, it seems to me. So it's a challenge. There's truth to power. I agree with it, but it seems to be an incredible challenge in certain contexts. Would anyone like to speak? I can see the chat is alive, which is great. And Howard, I was going to say, your wonderful ICM reports, if you could share any links in the chat, that would be great. We can, of course, go to the website as well. Would anyone like to contribute to this building up of the kind of picture of the challenge that we face? I think you can just unmute yourselves. Is probably the best way of doing it.
Hello, Ben. It's just me. It's Salia. Yeah. I think there was. I can't quote who it was, but I heard a comment about the number of scientifically trained or medically trained politicians. I'm talking about the UK, and I'm talking in reference to when there was a lot of confusion about whether we would have a lockdown or not. I'm talking pre-Christmas. And one comment that was made was about the reduced number of people within power with political seats, politicians who had any ounce of medical or scientific background or training, and yet they were running departments where health and the response to COVID was was key. Is it time to think about how we shift that? I don't know how, and I'm very curious to understand, and maybe it's something I'll look at how countries where there is a greater number of these people, what the response has been, especially in terms of misinformation, although I do note that Elsie says, that they can sometimes be part of the problem, but again, I don't know in terms of data, and I'm really sad to hear what the last speaker said, Francis said about truth to power. I mean, this is the one time where we shouldn't be banging on doors to be heard at all.
Thank you, Saliha. Would anyone else like to add something? Francis,
if I may just
yes.
to what I just said there, the Tanzanian may he rest his soul, rest in peace. He had a doctorate in chemistry.
Elsie, we need you speaking out loud because you're very good on the chat box.
Hi, Ben. No, I was just really confirming everything that Salia and Francis have said. Although I live in Liverpool, I'm originally from Ghana, so I've been following closely some of the developments over there. And I've done quite a bit of work over the last year looking at legal protections for healthcare workers, some of which tackles like censorship of medical professionals in different parts of the world. And so, yeah, this is quite a crucial issue, especially where you have in some countries where healthcare workers are seen as the spreaders of the disease. And so in some communities, they have been victims of violence. So there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of misinformation, and where you have some scientifically trained people who are not quite in alignment with the science and the data out there. It's such a huge issue. So plenty needs to be done to tackle that.
Thank you so much. Howard.
Ben, if I may, also on this, the Truth to Power point, you see, for me, this is why our national nursing associations are such a fundamental and important piece of the jigsaw. I think one of the phenomenal successes of the Nursing Now campaign has been that it has brought the different parts of nursing together in country. Nursing sometimes it perhaps isn't so good in terms of, you know, the regulators get together in one group and the educators in another, in the National Nursing Associations another. And Nursing Now has provided a wonderful campaign to coalesce and bring the community together. But then as a community, to speak on behalf of those people who you are representing, the strength through solidarity and through union as well. One of the trends that we've picked up over the last year, and I'm worried about this going forward, because I think it speaks to the anger point that we mentioned already. We are seeing an increase in disputes and industrial actions that are taking place in some countries because of the treatment, because of what nurses and others have been through. And ICN has become more involved in those over the last year. Just this week, I wrote to the Prime Minister in Lesotho, a long ongoing dispute, and it's complicated because it is to do with COVID, but it's also to do with how a particular health system is managed as well. But where you have got, you know, health workers and nurses who have been summarily dismissed for raising concerns about their working environment, their pay and their conditions. And I think it is important for, you know, nursing to be able to come together in countries, nationally through associations, but internationally as well, to say, to call it out and to say we can do better. And I think it is those, but it is absolutely for me those two things. It is not about solely, you know, often it's not a thump on the table and an angry response. It's about doing better. I mean, I've said before, you know, when we talk about advocacy is just the road, change is the destination. And if I want somebody to change, yes, I need to use the data, I need to have dialogue, I need to bring forward solutions, but I need some form of relationship as well if I'm gonna move that person or that group as well. I need to try and find a common interest that we can all bring, but we can all come around. Just last night, I was talking to the Washington Post, who were doing a piece on Brazil, really badly affected, and this issue about the political leadership down there. You know, again, another political leader in Bolsonaro who's not been wearing face masks and giving public health messages, and understandably, both health workers and and the public, are confused. They're angry, but then you see this lack of compliance, understandably, because of the mixed messages. And we were talking about how that lack of compliance, because of the failure in the political leadership, is becoming an issue of national security. It's that important in terms of not just civil unrest, but the strength of your health systems to keep people well, and people having a fight to get oxygen canisters as well. And I think there is something within all of this about how we also reframe some of the arguments and shape them differently. We've been trying to do that through ICN. So as much as I talked early on about the numbers and data, to take it to some higher place about what sort of society do we want, what do we want our economies to look like, what do we mean when we talk about national security and safety.
Thank you very much, Howard. Amanda, do you want to add anything? You're in Malawi, of course, but also you take a kind of wider perspective through the Health Workers for All Coalition. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, no, thanks a lot, Ben. I mean, I've been listening with a lot of interest and really thought-provoking discussions, and I agree with all the previous comments and reflections from the other speakers. And I think I've just been like challenged, and I'm just thinking through this whole thing. It's that. I think drawing from the earlier conversations, I think it's also like, how do we, I just feel for the health worker, they're fighting the pandemic, they're fighting their survival, they're fighting their mental health, they're fighting misinformation. And I feel like, and they have to fight the political system, the economic, they're fighting of the response of everything else. And so where is the rest of us, and how are we going to show that also compassion and solidarity that we've been talking about? And I think that this is where we all can bring the best parts of ourselves into the picture in terms of how do we also support them in that advocacy, because it pains me that in a lot of contexts, this is like the last resort that healthcare workers have to go to draw that attention is like, the strikes that lead to more deaths, because it's just like they don't know what else to do. How do we get people to listen to us? But I think that this is where we have civil society organizations, we have academia, we have a lot of other sectors that really, I think we can mobilize and work together to see how we can support them, to push through these difficult times. And because it's just like they are just there stuck in the middle. So I think for me, it's about, how do we get to support their work that they're doing, and they're speaking out on an individual level, on these platforms and networks that they have, the health professional networks, and support them. And I think what we often see is a lot of empowerment within the health workforce to speak to a lot of the issues, but sometimes maybe in some contexts, this is not across the board, but also like the support to navigate the wider kind of like, political system, which can lie in people, in civil society, in organizations, in other sectors, talk about the economic, talk about the governance, talk about, those people that can, open those relationships that you spoke about, Howard, that can, channel, how best, to engage and create those spaces as well, so that these issues can be heard and demanded, because we, in other sectors other than the medical profession associations, also have access to a lot of those power brokers and the decision makers that need to, make these decisions. So I think for me, the issue of solidarity and working together and having that compassion, like, we just not leaving them to be alone and fight the pandemic, fight, the mental health, fight misinformation, fight everything else, while the rest of us are just like watching helpless, because I think it's not like we're also just watching and like we would like to do something, but I think sometimes it's just that helplessness, like what can we really do? So I think for me it's just reflection and just thought-provoking, like what else can we do, all of us, so that they're not in this alone, that they feel that the world has us and they're behind our backs, because that will also give them the motivation and the power and the energy to push forward, because they know the whole world is supporting us. For all I've seen, politicians just making statements. We've been clapping at 7 p.m. and different times, like bravo healthcare workers, but then else. I think for me, that's just also a challenge to myself. Like, what else? What else can we do? Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. I'm putting people on the spot, but Myron, you've joined us, which is fantastic. I don't quite know what time it is in the States at the moment. I was wondering whether you could share any insights from the States, which has also faced huge problems. Great. Well, okay. So I think we'll move on to the second half then. So what we're getting is a pretty grim picture about stigma, about the violence, about misinformation, about death. We're beginning to build up a picture of who we might try and influence, heads of states, politicians that have medical backgrounds, but that is no guarantee. And we're thinking about marshalling support from academia and other sectors to try and win our arguments. And I think the point Howard made about national organizations is also terribly important, in the sense that individuals should not be expected to bear these difficult messages alone, and therefore solidarity through national representative organizations is terribly important. So the second half of this breakout is very much focused on looking in concrete terms about how we're investing in people to turn them into powerful advocates. And I'm going to start with Howard, and then I'm going to move to Charlotte. Howard.
Thanks again, Ben. And I just wanted to give some, I guess, some examples of what I think are some important advocacy pieces that we've seen over the last few months, and try and link some of those together. I've mentioned already the State of the World's Nursing report. I mean, it seems incredible to say that it's the first time last year on World Health Day, just over a year ago, we had the first ever State of the World's Nursing report. We'd had one for midwifery, a couple for midwifery beforehand. An incredibly powerful data set, the best we've ever had. We can pick over where it might be better, but let's look at what we do have. It's about then taking that data into a dialogue. What is the data telling us? And you do not need to be an economist or a scientist or have some great policy analysis brain to look at some of that data and say, you know what, there's only 60-70% of countries that have a chief nursing and midwifery officer. Why do half of countries not have in place the mechanisms to support advanced nursing practice? What do we, if we know that we've got a 6 million shortage, but actually if you break that down, 80-90% of it is low middle income countries. What's that all about? And does that then make it right that the countries, the higher income countries might recruit from those lower middle income countries when they are short? There are some very simple conversations which the data can take you to. So I think that the data and the dialogue is important, and then obviously it's the piece around decision making, which is where we started to get into the art of that, the relationship issues, which I'll say a little bit more about. Just on that global level, our State of the World's Nursing report, I've said before, I believe we should have it every 2 years. I'm already advocating for one for next for next year. But where it fits globally is not just then having that data report. This May, we are working on a strategy, the next global nursing and midwifery strategy, which will go to the World Health Assembly, I think, for I hope for sign off for ratification, but something that I'm really very, very keen on, because I'm a relatively newcomer to international work, but when I did start my ICN journey, it was just when the last strategic directions for nursing and midwifery was launched, and it was a good strategy. But you know what, we never really monitored it. There weren't any metrics, there weren't any indicators to tell us how we are doing. And this is where the data to the dialogue decision making point, we need to be able to track and monitor that. If we think that 6 million plus more is not acceptable, that we want more chief nursing officers, everybody agrees on that, and people will, pre-pandemic, they'll enjoy coming to Geneva and sitting in the executive boardroom and saying this is a situation we need to address. Well, in a gentle way, it's about and sometimes not such a gentle way, holding feet to fire. Well, how do you do that? Monitor the progress and have some transparency and have those metrics. And then just a couple of other examples, Ben, in terms of not just the sort of a data point on which to advocate to say this is wrong. We put Pilar, my colleague, has put our shortages and aging report in the chat box. We do all the analysis around the numbers, but then we say these are the sorts of things that we think countries need to be doing to retain people. Decent working conditions. Yes, it's all of the pay issues, but there are also some huge issues around flexibility of employment, being respected in the workplace, feeling you have a voice in the workplace and that you're listened to, that there's the opportunity for career development, that there's mental health support as well. Again, some of that we know isn't rocket science, but set it out, be clear about that. Another example of where we tried to go to a solution and we got some criticism. At the same time, we're seeing all of this shortage, the huge shortage. We all know that in a number of countries, as their economies are crashing or struggling as a result of the pandemic, there are people in retail, in hospitality, in transport who are losing their jobs in numbers that shadow the 6, 10, 12 million shortage in nursing. So we said, well, isn't there a solution under our nose here? Why aren't we looking at how we support people losing their jobs in some sectors to retrain to go into not just nursing but into healthcare? And we put the idea and the concept together and we put it out, and we called it, because you'd need funding and support to do it, a Health Education Opportunity Retraining Fund. And if you look at the acronym for that, it was a HERO fund. It's a HERO fund. We did that deliberately. We then got some criticism, which I absolutely understand, which is around the whole debate about, this is not a war. Do not talk about nurses and others as soldiers who are sort of, to justify the sacrifice they make, because that's unacceptable. I understand that and I accept all of that. But the reason we said, here's an idea, it's a HERO fund, was because we were trying to attract the attention of policymakers, of politicians. We were going for a different audience. And that's where you get into, I don't want to, I was saying it sounds more sophisticated, and I don't mean it to be, because it is actually simple as logic, but you're trying to change, the destination is change. Who am I trying to change? And you may well need to reframe and shape and communicate your message in a very different way. I'll stop, Ben. Before we finish, there were some issues I think to do with vaccines and the rollout as well, which we should perhaps touch on. But let me stop there.
Oh, that's great. And Pilar, thank you very much for sharing those reports. Honestly, congratulations to the ICN. It's fantastic. I love that phrase also, data to dialogue. Charlotte, can you give us insight into what you're up to at THET and the way you're partnering with health workers to influence decision makers?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben, and thank you, Howard and Francis, as well. I think many of the points and phrases that have been used already this afternoon hopefully will come through in my presentation now. And as Howard said, from a very international, large global scale, we're taking it local, and we're on that path to change as well. So Amanda quite rightly noted just now that health workers are fighting, and more so than ever, it's important that we join this fight with them. We continue to see the challenges roll in. The latest one, or the largest one, facing that at the moment and described as a gut punch to the world's poorest, is the decision the UK government have made recently to cut its aid commitment to 0.5%. We know from leaked reports, at least, that some of the poorest and most conflict affected countries in the world will have their UK aid programmes cut by more than half. And we have colleagues, friends, family in many of these countries and work alongside them daily, so understand exactly the impact this will have. We're yet to understand the permanence of these cuts, but we know they're severe and we know that they are coming at us. So we've decided to launch, and as of last year, we've been working really to move our voice from one of global to local influence, working to really persuade MPs at local level across the UK to change their attitudes towards aid and to become supportive and understand the need for investing in UK aid, and particularly that investment into global health. We're also seeing, as Howard and Francis and many others this morning have touched on, how the voices of health workers around the world are becoming amplified. There are challenges, and Solaire, no least, has mentioned those challenges in the voices and representation of health workers. And in the UK, those voices number over 1.4 million. It's vast, and they're at the centre of our response. So how do we make them heard? Well, as Howard noted, advocacy is the road and change is the destination, and the need to find the common interest is key. So what we've done is we have focused a campaign on seeking to mobilise NHS voices and support them to be heard, to influence members of Parliament to become publicly supportive of UK aid investments. Scoping has led us to focus on 8 Conservative MPs who are currently sitting on the fence, but we think there's wiggle room to push them onto the right side of it. And over the years, finding that common interest has been at the heart of THET's work, and we've learned that narratives centering on mutual benefit, health security, and that NHS at the core of its well-being has been effective lines for communicating and advocating for those sustained investments. We've worked alongside supportive MPs from Theo Clark to Alistair Burt, and that has used its focus to really demonstrate how evidence can really illustrate the impact that this work is having. So in this vein, we believe that we can influence this group using these same narratives expressed by those at the centre of the story. By working to amplify the voices from across the NHS, we'll demonstrate over and over again, because the stories are countless, of how the clinical, social and well-being benefits that can come from the UK's health sector engaging in global health come through to the NHS and benefit us all as service users as well. From local NHS trust events to a national UHC event, and from postcards through their door to briefings on their desk, they'll be bombarded by messaging that focuses on an authentic, accurate and actionable way that they too can show their support for the NHS and for global health at this crucial time. You'll have noted that 8 is a very small number compared to the many hundreds of MPs that sit across the UK. But we really feel that our role now is on focusing on the quality of this engagement rather than the quantity of those we're seeking to influence. And we're joining our efforts with those from across the sector, those who are with bigger voices and bigger presences and more powerful members to sit at the table. So from Action to Global Health to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, our campaign's really going to work alongside those public and private efforts to influence this. Of course, key to this is the NHS, as I mentioned, and as a workforce, despite the adversity of the past year, they continue to look outwards, finding ways to support and be supported by colleagues, which we've seen throughout all of the breakouts earlier today and the keynotes that have been shared. And in November, very excitingly, we embarked on the first NHS survey on global engagement with Ipsos Mori, and I'm pleased to say that luckily this served to compound our knowledge that the NHS is a global force for good and one that believes in UK aid and its investment. We reached over 400 NHS workers, and through that we've been able to gain unique insights into how important global health is to the NHS. We found, for example, that 62% of participants engaged in global health activity, be that volunteering or further study, and 94% of respondents believe that UK to LMICs is important or essential as we move forward. So to support this and to grow an NHS voice in support of ODA, we're also currently developing a database, which at the moment we're calling Health Advocates Database, as Howard quite rightly has said that phrasing around heroes is rather tricky. So this will be a compendium of global health advocates willing to support these calls to action that we're hoping to send through the doors and into email inboxes of MPs. And we'll be supporting these advocates to share their experiences at these events and on social media. And in creating this database, I hope many of you will join us and we'll be sharing the details of how to do so in the coming months. But we'll also be working again with other organisations, trying to provide a kind of one-stop resource for organisation, governments, media outlets who wish to draw on these positive spokespeople as we move into this ever-changing scenario. So as Amanda said, let's move from applause to action. There's many ways being shared throughout the day. But as a community, we know that we continue to push for change, and effective advocacy is one of our strongest tools to support that continued impact of our work. The power of persistent efforts to raise awareness and understanding of the vital role health workers play must not be underestimated. We will be amplifying the voice of health workers across the world. From events to social media campaigns, we will make those voices heard, demonstrating the impact that UK aid investments in global health has for communities from Manchester to Myanmar. I hope you will join us as we stand together ensuring health for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. And, you know, if several things resonating. Health workers may not be heroes, as Howard says, but they're certainly highly respected. And when you give us a figure like 1.3 million or 1.4 million, which is the size of the NHS workforce, you really sort of excite me with that, sort of reminding me what a force. I mean, obviously not everyone holds the same views, but it's a hugely potentially influential force. Kerry, you were talking about compulsory leadership training in the chat box, but I think where we're heading is towards compulsory advocacy training, aren't we?
Yes, if you're wanting a response, I think that advocacy grows from people having the confidence to speak out, and I think if systems are going to change, then we need to grow more confident healthcare workers who don't just stay in the clinical workforce box. So much training just keeps people with the clinical mindset, and so many health workers don't actually believe. They think that they can make change. They think they're too small, or they think no one will listen. But it grows bit by bit by bit by bit. And I think if we had elements of this more comprehensively inside clinical workforce training, then we would start to grow more confident leaders, which then leads on to those that advocate and can support each other against the challenges that undoubtedly are faced in many ways. So that was my point. Thank you so much.
And I'm wondering who we have in the room with us now. Is everyone here a confident advocate already, you know, engaging decision makers? Or do we have also people who are new to advocacy? I'm just thinking about how we provide routes, how we support people to gain that confidence, Kerry, and to sort of become the very, 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 very necessary advocates that this world needs. Does anyone have any sense of that? I can see distinguished people left, right and centre, which makes me think they're all rather experienced. Francis, would you like to add anything to this second half?
Yes, let's take up your exchange with Kerry there, or is it leadership or advocacy training? They cannot be separated, in my view. And it is true that myself, growing up in the medical profession, was brought up to be an excellent clinician and leave those other things to other people. But it can't work that way. We have got to be advocates for the people so that they can access the skills that we have. And the health professions, I hope one of the decisions we'll be making here today is to see how we can mobilize ourselves through our various groups, the ICN and WMA, at global level, but all the way down to national associations in the countries to engage on behalf of the people, and of course on behalf of ourselves, with advocacy and leadership, or leadership and advocacy. I think it's leadership which turns round into causing change, which is the destination. So I'm looking forward to how we end the day today. But so far, so good. We are coming up very nicely with very good submissions. And I'm hoping that one of the takeaway messages for today would be how together as health workers, we can get on top of this business of alternative facts, which affects the way in which we provide services to the people.
Thank you so much. Charlotte, you'll be glad to know, I hope you're observing the chat box. There are lots of volunteers to help, including Sarah Kavanagh. Sarah, do you want to say something?
Thanks, Ben. Charlotte, that was just amazing. That's really inspiring, and I think we all want to help with this. Coming back to your question, Ben, about how do we teach people to be advocates? How do we learn advocacy? I think some people it will come more naturally, but things can be learnt. They can be learnt from a mentor, and they can be learnt from talking to colleagues in a space where you don't feel that your suggestions are not welcome. And going back to something I think Charlotte raised in her presentation about some of the benefits to the National Health Service and to all those involved with partnerships is actually improving their well-being at work. It's making them better leaders, and by doing this, maybe learning to become advocates, and actually that they're totally allowed to go to their MP or their leader or make a suggestion. It might not be agreed with by everybody, but it's having the confidence to do that. And I think that the partnership scheme has really, really embedded that and empowered individuals to feel able to do that. But I think mentorship and going back to some leadership training that actually includes this would be really beneficial.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to ask Howard to conclude. Charlotte, did you want to say anything? And Francis, if you wanted any final tips, or I suppose what we're really thinking about is, you know, the practical side of this conference. What can we actually do which would be most useful? Charlotte, do you want to say anything? And then I'll come to Francis, and then finally with Howard.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Just to really sort of raise our support as well for that mentoring and sort of leadership skills in terms of advocacy. And one of the things we're planning to do is create a toolkit for this. But again, I think it's all about creating those spaces, Sarah, as you say, to be able to share and really just talk it through with one another. And we know that some people will be more comfortable than others at speaking in different forums and joining different actions. But I think there's enough of us that together we can pick and choose our way through it, but raise our voice together. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Francis, did you want to add anything?
Yes, you know, from what Charlotte said about the 1.4 million And from what you, Ben, have said, we are respected, and I know also from working here in Africa that we health workers are listened to. We need now, as the post-COVID movement on getting us to be change agents on behalf of the people. And all over the world, this should now be the new paradigm change for us as health workers. We know a lot, we can help a lot, but then many times our hands are tied by things which other people, either because they do not understand or maybe because they have other agendas, they prevent us from helping and serving the population. So we need to step in now in the new direction to take charge ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Howard, final words to you, if I may.
Well, look, firstly, just say I think it's been a fabulous conversation. I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to be involved, and thank you, Ben, to you and all of your colleagues for facilitating this. And of course, what it's reinforced is the solidarity amongst all of us that we need to continue and to build and to grow. One very practical point we haven't mentioned: this is the WHO designated year of the health and care worker. We are ICN, along with our colleagues from the World Medical Association, the physios, the dentists, some of the unions are involved in discussions with WHO. I'm very much hoping that we'll have a good, strong focus on this at the World Health Assembly. And I think there could be some very practical things this year in terms of how we tie our working together and our advocacy around the year of the health and the care worker. But I just wanted to also just to pick up on this this futures point, because it's something that we're thinking a lot about at ICN as well. The platform, the profile, the advocacy that we've been able to do over the last few months has been it's nothing that we'd have wished for, but it's been necessary. But when we get the other side of this, we know that pandemics change the world, and we've touched on this here in terms of what we want future healthcare systems to look like, what the new normal post-COVID, whatever we want to call it, will be. I feel really strongly, as does the president, the leaders of ICN, that we must maintain the prominent leadership role that we and voice and profile and visibility that we have had during the pandemic as we move into that next stage. The 12th of May is International Nurses Day. It's the anniversary of Florence Nightingale's birthday, and we always, ICN does lead celebrations for that. And our resource this year for the 12th of May is entitled A Vision for Future Health Care. That may be a little bit grand because it's still a work in progress. I don't want you to go to that and think, oh, they haven't worked it all out, because we haven't. But we've worked a little bit of it out. But it's also a signal of intent as well about us maintaining this position of leadership. And it's not just a nursing issue. This is about healthcare workers generally. That if we think to the future, and I'm sure that we could do another webinar and get agreement on issues like prevention, public health, integrated, sustainable healthcare systems. And if that is the sort of vision of future healthcare service, that's not just for politicians, policymakers and academics to decide what the design of that is. It's for healthcare workers. And we feel very, very strongly that we want to maintain nurses with all other healthcare workers and professionals as at the centre of making those decisions for our future. Thanks, Ben.
Howard, thank you. Francis, thank you. Charlotte, thank you. And everyone who contributed, thank you. Let's go and have our break, and I'll see you later for the panels. Thank you.